The morning arrived in Oak Ridge the way it always did, with little ceremony and less fanfare. First light brushed the eastern slopes of the distant Nevada mountains, painting them copper and gold. Sarah Mitchell stood on her front porch, coffee mug, warming her palms, watching as dawn crawled across her 5 acres of hardscrabble land. At 43, Sarah still turned heads. Her dark hair, now threaded with strands of silver at the temples, was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Time had etched fine lines around her green eyes, but they remained sharp, missing nothing. The locals said those eyes had seen more than most. They weren't wrong. The farmhouse behind her had weathered 60 Nevada winters. Its white paint had surrendered in patches to the relentless sun, but the structure remained solid, like Sarah herself. 7 years a widow, she had learned that some things break while others merely weather. She drained the last of her coffee and went inside. The Winchester Model 70 rifle that had belonged to her father hung above the stone fireplace. She didn't hunt anymore, but the rifle remained a reminder of simpler times. Sarah's fingers brushed the worn wooden stock as she passed a ritual she had performed every morning since moving to the farmhouse after Thomas died. Thomas. Even now, 7 years later, his absence felt like a physical thing. Her husband had been everything the small town of Oak Ridge respected: dedicated sheriff's deputy, volunteer firefighter, little league coach. What the town didn't know, what Sarah had learned only after they were married, was the toll his work took on him. The nightmares, the hypervigilance, the way his eyes would sometimes go distant during dinner, like his body was at the table but his mind was back in some dark alley or highway pullout. A cruiser had delivered the news on a Tuesday evening. Routine traffic stop turned deadly. Shot twice at point-blank range. Didn't suffer. The platitudes offered by the department chaplain had washed over Sarah like rain on parched earth, quickly absorbed, leaving no trace. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 6. Time to leave for the clinic. Sarah Mitchell's 2017 Ford F-150 kicked up dust as she navigated the unpaved road from her property to the county highway. The truck had been Thomas's, another memory she couldn't bring herself to relinquish. The radio played soft country classic songs about heartbreak and resilience that seemed to speak directly to the empty passenger seat. Oak Ridge emerged from the morning haze, a collection of weathered buildings clustered around Main Street like survivors huddled against the cold. The town had been born during the Silver Rush, survived by becoming an agricultural hub, and now existed in that peculiar limbo of rural American communities, not quite dying, not quite thriving. The Oak Ridge Community Medical Center occupied what had once been the town's bank, a stately brick building with white columns flanking the entrance. The original vault now housed medical supplies. Sarah had always appreciated the symbolism. What the town once valued enough to lock away was now medicine, not money. "Morning, Ellen," Sarah called to the receptionist as she entered. Ellen Gunderson is 68 and still sharp as the day she'd started manning the front desk 20 years ago, looked up from her computer. "Morning, Sarah. Coffee's fresh. Dr. Brennan called and his daughter's running a fever. He'll be in after lunch." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. The clinic operated with a skeleton staff: one full-time doctor, 2 nurses, including herself, a receptionist, and a part-time physician's assistant. When someone couldn't make it in, everyone else picked up the slack. "Any appointments this morning?" Sarah hung her jacket on the coat rack by the door. Ellen pushed a clipboard across the counter. "Mrs. Henderson at 7:30 for her blood pressure. The Peterson boy at 8 looks like another ear infection. Walk-ins after that." Sarah took the clipboard and headed to her small office. The day would unfold like most in Oak Ridge, predictably steadily. Blood pressure checks for the elderly, vaccinations for children, stitches for the occasional farm accident, referrals to specialists in Carson City or Reno for anything serious. But lately something had been changing in the rhythm of the clinic. Sarah had sensed it first about 3 months ago, an uptick in unfamiliar faces. Men mostly with vague complaints. Back pain, migraines, insomnia, all requesting specific medications by name. Dr. Brennan had become increasingly uncomfortable with the pattern. 2 weeks ago, he'd called a meeting with the staff. "We're seeing too many out-of-town patients requesting opioids," he'd said, face grave beneath his salt and pepper beard. "I've spoken with Sheriff Calloway. He says there's been similar reports from clinics in Millwood and Pine Grove. Some kind of prescription network forming." Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on her doorframe. Jim Calloway stood there looking every bit the aging lawman in his tan uniform and white Stetson. Deep lines were carved into his weathered face, his blue eyes clear, despite the 60-plus years behind them. "Got a minute?" he asked, voice gravelly from decades of unfiltered Marlboros. Sarah gestured to the chair across from her desk. "For the sheriff, always." Jim settled his lanky frame into the seat, removing his hat and placing it on his knee. He and Thomas had come up through the academy together, remained friends for 20 years. After Thomas died, Jim had become something between a protective older brother and a surrogate father to Sarah. "Stop by to give you a heads up," he said, keeping his voice low. "Got word from Carson City about that group we discussed. They're expanding operations." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. "Here. Can't say for certain, but there have been sightings. 3 men in a black Suburban with California plates at the Oak Ridge Inn last night. One matches the description of a person of interest in a Carson City investigation." Sarah nodded, processing the information. "We've had more requests for pain medication. Dr. Brennan's been turning most of them down." Jim's expression darkened. "These people don't take rejection well, Sarah. If they approach you—" "I know the protocol, Jim." Her tone was gentle but firm. "I'll report anything suspicious." The sheriff stood, settling his hat back on his head. "Thomas would want me looking out for you." Sarah's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know." After Jim left, Sarah sat quietly at her desk, staring at the photo of Thomas in his dress uniform. What she hadn't told the sheriff, what she had never told anyone in Oak Ridge, was that she was far better equipped to handle trouble than anyone suspected. Before meeting Thomas before nursing school, there had been another life. 4 tours in the Middle East. Not as a combat soldier, women weren't officially allowed in those roles then, but as a combat medic attached to an all-female special operations unit. The Valkyries, they'd called themselves unofficially. 8 women with specialized training deployed for missions that required female operators. That part of her life had ended 15 years ago, buried along with her military records in classified archives. Sarah Mitchell, the quiet, competent nurse of Oak Ridge, Nevada, had once been Staff Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, decorated combat medic with more confirmed kills than most infantry soldiers. Some nights she still woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding from dreams of dust and blood and the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors. The morning passed quickly. Mrs. Henderson's blood pressure was elevated. Sarah adjusted her medication. The Peterson boy indeed had another ear infection. She prepared a prescription for antibiotics. At 10:30, with no patients waiting, she stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. Main Street was quiet as usual. Hank's Hardware on the corner, the Bluebird Diner across the street, Jensen's Grocery, with its faded awning. Familiar. Safe. Sarah had chosen Oak Ridge precisely because nothing ever happened here. That sense of security shattered at precisely 11:17 a.m. when a black Suburban with California plates pulled into the clinic's small parking lot. Sarah watched from the clinic steps as 3 men emerged from the vehicle. The leader, she immediately identified him as such from his body language, and the deference shown by the others, was tall and lean, perhaps 50, with close-cropped silver hair, and the hard physique of someone who maintained military discipline long after leaving service. The second man was younger, bulkier, with a neck too thick for his collar, and hands that hung at his sides like weapons waiting to be deployed. The third was wiry, nervous, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Something about the leader nagged at Sarah's memory, but she couldn't place him. She stepped back inside, moving to the reception desk. "Ellen," she said quietly, "call Sheriff Calloway. Tell him our California visitors are here." Ellen's eyes widened slightly, but she reached for the phone without question. Sarah moved to the center of the waiting room as the door opened and the 3 men entered. "Good morning," she said, professional smile in place. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Medical Center. How can I help you today?" The leader returned her smile, a practiced expression that never reached his eyes. "Good morning. I hope you can help us. My associate here," he gestured to the bulky man beside him, "has been experiencing some severe back pain. We were told Dr. Brennan might be able to help." Sarah maintained her pleasant expression. "Brennan is out until this afternoon, I'm afraid. I'm Sarah Mitchell, head nurse. If your friend would like to fill out some paperwork, I can see if we can fit him in with the doctor later today." "That's very kind," the leader said smoothly. "But I understand there might be ways to expedite things. We're just passing through, you see. Perhaps some pain medication to tide him over. I'm afraid I can't prescribe controlled substances, Sarah replied. Only Dr. Brennan can do that, and he'll need to examine the patient first. The leader's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, we understand protocol. It's just that my friend is in considerable discomfort, and we were told this clinic might be more accommodating than some others in the area. Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. I'm not sure who told you that, sir, but they were mistaken. We follow all state regulations regarding controlled substances. The large man shifted his weight, a subtle intimidation tactic Sarah recognized immediately. The leader placed a hand on his companion's arm, restraining him. I see, the leader said, voice cooling. Perhaps we misunderstood. We'll wait for the doctor then. Sarah gestured to the forms on the reception counter. You'll need to fill these out. We'll need identification and insurance information. Of course, the leader replied, making no move toward the paperwork. We'll take care of that. Thank you for your time, Nurse Mitchell. The way he said her name sent a chill down Sarah's spine. They'd known who she was before walking in. The three men turned and left, climbing back into the Suburban. Ellen's hand trembled slightly as she hung up the phone. Sheriff's on his way. Sarah nodded, watching through the window as the vehicle pulled away. Call Dr. Brennan, tell him what happened. Then call Pine Grove and Millwood clinics and warn them. By the time Sheriff Calloway arrived, the Suburban was long gone. Sarah described the encounter while Jim took notes in his small, precise handwriting. Did you get a name? He asked. Sarah shook her head. They didn't offer, and they left when I asked for ID. Jim's mouth set in a grim line. License plate. California plates. I got a partial KLM and either a 5 or a 6. Good, I'll run it. Jim tucked his notebook away. Sarah, I want you to be careful. These people... I know, Jim. She met his gaze steadily. This isn't my first rodeo. The sheriff studied her for a long moment. No, I suppose it isn't. Thomas mentioned once that you'd served, but he never said where or what you did. Sarah offered a tight smile. That's because I never told him everything. Something in her tone must have convinced the sheriff not to press further. He nodded once, squeezed her shoulder gently, and left. The rest of the day passed without incident. Dr. Brennan arrived, was briefed on the morning's events, and saw his scheduled patients. At 6, Sarah locked up the clinic and walked to her truck. The slashed tires registered first, then the shattered driver's side window. Finally, the note tucked under the windshield wiper. Written on clinic stationery, the message was blunt. Reconsider your position. We'll be back tomorrow for a more productive conversation. Sarah photographed the note with her phone before carefully folding it into an evidence bag from the clinic's supplies. She called Jim, described the vandalism, and promised to drop the note at the station in the morning. I'll send a deputy to take you home, Jim offered. No need, Sarah replied. Ellen can give me a ride. I'll deal with the truck tomorrow. After hanging up, Sarah took a deep breath and assessed her situation with the cold clarity that had kept her alive in combat. The threat was escalating faster than expected. She needed to prepare. Ellen drove her home, clucking with motherly concern about those awful men and insisting Sarah call if she needed anything. Sarah thanked her, promised she would be fine, and waved from the porch as Ellen's sedan disappeared down the dirt road. As soon as she was alone, Sarah moved with purpose. She locked and bolted the door, then drew all the curtains. From the hall closet, she retrieved a small stepladder and positioned it beneath the attic access panel in the ceiling. Standing on the ladder's top step, she pushed the panel aside and pulled down the folding stairs. The attic was clean and organized, unlike most. Plastic bins labeled Christmas, winter clothes, and Thomas's things were stacked neatly against the insulated walls. Sarah moved to the far corner where an old steamer trunk sat beneath a dusty tarp. The trunk's brass lock opened with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was the evidence of a life Oak Ridge had never seen. A Beretta M9 service pistol, a KA-bar combat knife, a tactical medical kit far more advanced than anything at the clinic, a satellite phone with a single number programmed into it, and photographs. 8 women in desert camouflage, arms around each other's shoulders, standing before a Black Hawk helicopter. Sarah traced her finger over the faces: Rachel Maria, Danny Elizabeth, Jas Kate, and Mel, the Valkyries, her sisters in all but blood. Sarah had maintained contact with only one Rachel Torres, now living under her maiden name in Millwood, 30 miles east. After leaving the military, Rachel had joined the FBI's hostage rescue team before retiring due to a knee injury. If anyone would understand the situation Sarah now faced, it would be Rachel. She picked up the satellite phone and pressed the call button. Rachel answered on the second ring. "Code in," came the familiar voice, terse and professional. "Sierra Mike, July 2007, Sarah replied, using her initials and the date of their last deployment together. "Verified. Go ahead." Sarah outlined the situation succinctly, describing the men, the veiled threats, the vandalized truck. "I know that group," Rachel said when Sarah finished. "They've been on our radar. Started as prescription fraudsters in Southern California, escalated to pressuring, and eventually taking over small rural clinics as distribution points. They're connected to a larger network moving products from Mexico." "Products," Sarah repeated. "Not just pills. Pills, heroin, meth. They use the legitimate prescriptions as cover and launder money through the clinic billing systems. It's sophisticated." Sarah processed this information. How do they typically operate once they identify a target clinic? Intimidation first, property damage threats. If that doesn't work, they escalate to violence, usually against staff family members, rather than the medical personnel themselves. They need the providers functional. "I'm not going to let them establish here, Rachel." There was a pause on the line. "I know that tone, Mitchell. What are you planning?" "Nothing yet, but I wanted you aware of the situation." Another pause. "I'll be there tomorrow. Don't engage until I arrive." "Understood." After ending the call, Sarah returned the phone to the trunk but removed the Beretta, the knife, and the medical kit. She needed to prepare the farmhouse. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah transformed her home into a defensive position. Fishing lines strung with small bells created a rudimentary perimeter alarm around the property. Motion-sensing lights were positioned to eliminate shadows around the house. Furniture was rearranged to provide cover and clear fields of fire. In her bedroom, Sarah opened the gun safe concealed behind a false panel in her closet. Inside was Thomas's service weapon, a Glock 22 and a Mossberg 500 shotgun. She loaded both along with spare magazines for the Beretta. By midnight, her preparations complete, Sarah allowed herself a moment of reflection. The life she had carefully constructed in Oak Ridge was about to change irrevocably. Either she would drive these men away and continue as before, or she would be exposed for what she truly was. Neither outcome ideal. Sarah slept lightly, waking at the smallest sounds. At 5, she rose and made coffee, then dressed in her usual scrubs beneath a light jacket that concealed the Beretta in its shoulder holster. The weight of the weapon, once so familiar, it had seemed an extension of her body, now felt foreign after years without carrying. Rachel called as Sarah was finishing her coffee. "I'm 20 minutes out. Meet me at the diner in town." The Bluebird Diner opened at 6 for the farmers and ranchers who started their days before dawn. Sarah arrived at 6:15 and took a booth in the back with a clear view of the entrance and the parking lot beyond. At 6:22, a woman entered. She was Sarah's age, with auburn hair, cut in a practical bob, wearing jeans, hiking boots, and a flannel shirt beneath a leather jacket. To the casual observer, she looked like any other rural Nevada resident. Sarah knew better. The jacket was specially designed to conceal a sidearm. The boots, while appearing well-worn, were tactical grade with reinforced toes and stability features. The amber-tinted sunglasses hanging from her shirt pocket were ballistic rated. Rachel Torres slid into the booth opposite Sarah with the fluid grace of someone who maintained peak physical condition despite a supposedly career-ending injury. "You look like hell, Mitchell," she said by way of greeting. Sarah smiled despite herself. "Missed you too, Torres." The waitress appeared and they ordered coffee. When she was gone, Rachel leaned forward. "Brought you something." She slid a small package across the table. Inside was an earpiece similar to a hearing aid, but far more sophisticated. "Secure comms," Rachel explained. "Military grade, encrypted, range of about 2 miles in open terrain." Sarah pocketed the device. "You expecting trouble?" Rachel's smile was cold. "I'm ensuring tactical advantage. Now tell me about these men. The leader, describe him again." Sarah did, noting the military bearing, the silver hair, the contained menace. Rachel's expression darkened. "Marcus Stone, former Force Recon Marine, dishonorably discharged in 2010 for excessive force against civilians in Afghanistan. Went private sector after that, mercenary work mainly. Started showing up on law enforcement radar around 2015 in connection with various trafficking operations. You're sure it's him? Not positive without visual confirmation, but the description fits. If it is Stone, he's dangerous, well-trained, smart. Sarah absorbed this. Why would someone with his background be running prescription scams in rural Nevada? Seems beneath his skill set. Rachel nodded. That's what bothers me. There's something bigger happening. These small clinics, they're just nodes in a larger network. We're missing the bigger picture. The diner was filling up now, local faces Sarah recognized nodding greeting as they passed. She lowered her voice. What's the play? I've got a room at the Oak Ridge Inn. I'll maintain surveillance on the clinic today. If they show we identify positively, document and report. And if they make a move, Rachel's eyes, the same warm brown that had once watched Sarah's back across 3 war zones, hardened. Then we respond appropriately. They finished their coffee and left separately, Rachel first, then Sarah 5 minutes later. As Sarah walked to the clinic, she'd arranged for her truck to be towed to the garage for new tires and window repair. She considered her position. If the men returned today, it would likely be to threaten rather than negotiate. Dr. Brennan would be present, as would Ellen and Melissa, the part-time nurse. Civilians, all of them. Potential casualties if things escalated. Sarah reached the clinic at 7 and began preparing for the day. She stocked exam rooms, checked inventory, and reviewed patient files. At her desk, she placed the Beretta in the bottom drawer within easy reach. Dr. Brennan arrived at 7:30 looking tired. His daughter's fever had broken, but he'd been up most of the night monitoring her. Sarah briefed him on the expected return of the men and their likely intentions. Should we close the clinic? He asked, running a hand through his thinning hair. That's your call, Sarah replied, but I think it sends the wrong message. We'd be showing them we're afraid that their tactics work. The doctor nodded slowly. You're right. We stay open, but I'm calling Jim to request a deputy present today. Sarah agreed, though she doubted one deputy would make much difference if Marcus Stone and his men decided on violence. The morning passed tensely. Sarah jumped at small sounds, her combat instincts resurfacing after years of dormancy. By noon, there had been no sign of the black Suburban. Perhaps Stone was waiting, building anticipation, letting fear do his work for him. At 12:30, Sarah's earpiece crackled to life. Mitchell, check your phone, sending images. Sarah stepped into the restroom and checked her messages. Rachel had sent photos of 3 men entering the Oak Ridge Inn. One was clearly Marcus Stone. The second was the bulky man from yesterday. The third was new, younger, with the hyper-alert posture of someone either on stimulants or suffering PTSD. A second message followed. 2 more arrived in separate vehicle. Reinforcements. 5 men total, more than Sarah had anticipated. She texted back, plan. Rachel's response was immediate. Maintain position. Will advise. The afternoon crawled by. Sarah saw patients administered vaccinations, cleaned wounds, all while maintaining hypervigilance. At 3, her earpiece activated again. Movement, 2 vehicles leaving the inn, headed your way. Sarah's pulse quickened. Roger that. She moved to Dr. Brennan's office and knocked once before entering. They're coming, 2 vehicles. The doctor paled slightly but nodded. Jim's deputy is out on a call. Flat tire on the highway. Of course, Sarah muttered. Get Ellen and Melissa into the back. Lock the medication room. I'll handle the front. Dr. Brennan studied her with new eyes. Sarah, what exactly did you do before nursing? She offered a tight smile. Let's discuss my resume later. In the reception area, Sarah positioned herself behind the counter angle, calculated to keep the Beretta accessible while maintaining a clear view of the entrance. Through the window, she watched as the black Suburban pulled up, followed by a dark blue Ford F-250. Marcus Stone emerged from the Suburban, along with his 2 companions from the previous day. From the F-250 came 2 more men, one Hispanic with a shaved head and sleeve tattoos, the other a redhead with a patchy beard who looked barely out of his teens. 5 men for a small-town medical clinic. The disparity of force might have been laughable if Sarah hadn't recognized the seriousness of their intent. These men didn't expect resistance. They expected it to walk in, make threats, and walk out with compliance assured. They were about to be disappointed. The door opened and Marcus Stone entered, first followed by his associates. The reception area, designed for perhaps 10 waiting patients, suddenly felt cramped with the presence of 5 men radiating potential violence. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Sarah said, voice steady. "Can I help you?" Stone smiled, the expression colder than the previous day. "Nurse Mitchell, I believe we have unfinished business." "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean," Sarah replied. "If you're here to see Dr. Brennan, you'll need to make an appointment." Stone's smile vanished. "Let's dispense with the pretense. You know why we're here. You received our message last night." "You mean the vandalism of my vehicle?" "Yes, I received that message. So did the sheriff's department. They're very interested in speaking with you." The bulky man from yesterday stepped forward, hands clenching into fists. "Lady, you don't understand the situation you're in." Sarah held his gaze. "I understand perfectly. You want this clinic as a distribution point for your operation. You think because we're small and rural that we'll be easily intimidated. You're mistaken." Stone raised an eyebrow, seemingly reassessing her. "You seem well-informed for a small-town nurse. And you seem overqualified for a prescription scammer, Mr. Stone." The use of his name had the desired effect. Stone's expression hardened. "You've been checking up on me. I'm flattered." "Don't be. Your reputation precedes you." Stone stepped closer to the counter. "Then you know what happens to people who cross me." "I know what happens to people who threaten me," Sarah countered. For a moment, the two stared at each other, neither blinking. Then Stone laughed, a sound entirely devoid of humor. "I like you, Nurse Mitchell. You've got spirit. But this isn't a negotiation. By this time tomorrow, you'll either be working with us or you'll be looking for a new job, maybe a new town. Is that what happened in Carson City and Millwood Pine Grove? How many clinics are you controlling now?" "Mr. Stone?" His eyes narrowed. "You really have been busy. I'm impressed. But ultimately, it changes nothing. We'll be back tomorrow for your final answer. Consider carefully what's at stake." Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. "We'll be here, as will the sheriff's department." Stone smiled again, this time with genuine amusement. "Your sheriff and his 2 deputies against my associates, I think you'll find the odds unfavorable." Without waiting for a response, Stone turned and walked out, his men following. Through the window, Sarah watched them climb into their vehicles and drive away. Her earpiece activated. "Good job, Mitchell. Clean exit. No escalation." "Yet," Sarah replied quietly. For the remainder of the afternoon, Sarah went through the motions of her job while her mind calculated scenarios, escape routes, defensive positions. At 5, she gathered Dr. Brennan, Ellen, and Melissa in the break room. "I don't believe it's safe for any of you to come in tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Those men will return, and they'll be looking for a more definitive answer." "We can't just close the clinic," DeBrandon protested. "People depend on us." "People depend on you being alive," Sarah countered. "One day closed is better than permanently shut down." Ellen wrung her hands. "Shouldn't we let the sheriff handle this?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "Jim is doing everything he can, but his resources are limited. These men are professionals, Ellen. They're dangerous." "Then what do we do?" Melissa asked, her young face pinched with worry. "You stay home tomorrow, all of you. Tell anyone who asks that there's a plumbing emergency." "I'll handle Stone and his men." Dr. Brennan frowned. "Handle them how exactly?" Sarah met his gaze evenly. "The less you know, the better." After a moment, the doctor nodded reluctantly. "I trust your judgment, Sarah, but I want you to promise me you'll call for help if things get out of hand." "I promise," Sarah lied smoothly. They locked up the clinic together, Dr. Brennan insisting on walking Sarah to her repaired truck, despite her assurances that she would be fine. As she drove home, Sarah cataloged what she knew against what she needed to know. Stone had escalated quickly from request to threat to property damage. His next move would likely be violence, not against her directly, as Rachel had pointed out, but against someone close to her or the clinic. Dr. Brennan and his family would be obvious targets, as would Ellen Baum and Melissa. Sarah had no family in Oak Ridge, no obvious pressure points except her property and her profession. That made her both the strongest link in the clinic's chain and the most logical person to confront Stone. At home, Sarah parked her truck in the barn rather than in the open beside the house. She checked the perimeter, ensuring her makeshift alarms were intact, then entered the house through the back door. Rachel was sitting at her kitchen table cleaning a disassembled handgun. "Make yourself at home," Sarah said dryly. Rachel didn't look up from her work. "You need better locks, or a dog, preferably both." Sarah put her medical bag on the counter. "I'll add it to my list." "Stone's men are watching your place," Rachel said, reassembling the weapon with practiced movements. "Two of them in a position about half a mile down the road. Amateur hour. I spotted them immediately. Surveillance only. For now, they're gathering intelligence routines, security measures, points of entry." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "They'll move tonight." "Most likely." Rachel looked up finally. "You ready for that?" Sarah walked to the refrigerator and removed 2 bottles of beer, offering one to her friend. "I wasn't ready for any of this. But here we are." They clinked bottles. "To old times," Rachel said. "To surviving new ones," Sarah replied. As darkness fell over the Nevada countryside, 2 women who had once been part of the military's most classified all-female combat unit were prepared for battle once more. This time the enemy wasn't foreign insurgents or terrorist cells. This time the battlefield wasn't some distant desert, but a small town medical clinic and a weathered farmhouse on 5 acres of hardscrabble land. Sarah Mitchell, the quiet, competent nurse of Oak Ridge, Nevada, was about to remind Marcus Stone why the Valkyries had been feared even by those they protected. The night stretched ahead, full of promise and threat in equal measure. Sarah checked her weapons one last time, the familiar ritual calming her nerves. Rachel positioned herself upstairs with a clear view of the approach to the house. They waited, 2 predators prepared for their prey as the moon rose over the distant mountains. The minutes crawled by like wounded soldiers. Moonlight painted silver streaks across the hardwood floor as Sarah Mitchell sat in darkness, back against the wall, Beretta resting on her knee. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, its deep chimes reverberating through the silent house. "Movement," Rachel's voice whispered through the earpiece. "Booth East perimeter. 2 figures approaching on foot." Sarah's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. Years of training had conditioned her body to remain calm while her mind sharpened into crystalline focus. Position throughout the Mauricio. Approximately 200 yards out, moving cautiously, they're using the tree line for cover. Outside, a gentle Nevada breeze rustled through the cottonwoods that lined the property. Too gentle to disturb the fishing line strung with small bells that Sarah had positioned earlier. Her makeshift perimeter alarm. "Weapons?" Sarah asked, rising silently to a crouch. "Confirmed. One carrying what looks like a shotgun. The other has a handgun." Sarah moved to the kitchen, staying low beneath the windows. From behind the refrigerator, she retrieved the Mossberg shotgun. The weight felt reassuring in her hands, solid, dependable. She checked the load once more, 5 shells alternating buckshot and slug. "Additional movement," Rachel reported, voice tense. "Vehicle approaching from the main road. Lights off." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Stone." "Likely. Vehicle matches the Suburban." The situation was evolving rapidly, more combatants than anticipated. Sarah mentally adjusted her strategy. "Hold position upstairs. I'm moving to the front porch. East side." "Roger that. I've got your 6." Sarah slipped through the darkened house like a ghost muscle memory, guiding her movements. 15 years of civilian life hadn't erased the tactical training that had once been as natural as breathing. At the front door, she paused, listening. The night had grown unnaturally silent. No crickets, no distant coyote calls. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. The porch wrapped around 3 sides of the farmhouse, offering multiple angles of approach and retreat. Sarah eased the front door open and slipped outside, keeping to the shadows. The worn boards beneath her feet knew her weight and didn't betray her with creaks. From her position, she could see the dirt road leading to the property. The black Suburban was now visible, crawling forward without headlights, guided only by moonlight. It stopped about 50 yards from the house engine still running. "Visual on the Suburban," Sarah whispered. "Can you see who's inside?" "Negative," Rachel replied. "Windows are tinted." "Wait, driver's door opening." Sarah tightened her grip on the shotgun. The driver's door of the Suburban swung open and a figure emerged. Even at this distance, she recognized Marcus Stone's distinctive silhouette, tall, lean military bearing, evident in every movement. Stone remained beside the vehicle, raising what appeared to be a radio to his mouth. Coordinating with the men approaching from the tree line, no doubt. "The 2 on foot have stopped at the perimeter," Rachel reported. "They're waiting for orders." Sarah weighed her options. She could remain hidden, let them make the first move, potentially allowing them to gain tactical advantage. Or she could disrupt their plan, force them to react rather than act. The decision crystallized in an instant. "Cover me," she said into the earpiece. "I'm engaging Stone directly." Before Rachel could protest, Sarah stepped off the porch and into the moonlight, shotgun held at low ready. She walked with deliberate, unhurried steps toward the Suburban. Stone spotted her immediately. His body language registered surprise, then wariness, as he noted the weapon in her hands. He didn't retreat to the safety of the vehicle, though. Instead, he stood his ground, watching her approach. When Sarah was approximately 20 yards from the Suburban, she stopped. "Private property, Mr. Stone," she called, wide voice, carrying clearly in the night air. "I don't recall inviting you." Stone's chuckle was audible, even at this distance. "Nurse Mitchell, you continue to surprise me. Most people hide when they see us coming." "I'm not most people, so I'm beginning to realize." Stone took a step forward, hands visible at his sides. "I have to admit this isn't the reception I expected." Sarah kept the shotgun pointed at the ground, but her finger rested lightly beside the trigger guard. "What did you expect, that I'd cower in my bedroom while you vandalized my home? That I'd be intimidated into cooperation?" "Something like that, yes." Stone took another step forward. "It usually works." "Not this time." Sarah remained perfectly still, a statue carved of moonlight and resolve. "Call off your men in the trees, then get back in your vehicle and leave. This is your only warning." Stone's amusement was evident in his voice. "My only warning? That's very generous of you, but I think you misunderstand the situation." He gestured casually toward the tree line. "I have 2 men flanking your position, armed men. I have 3 more with me. The odds aren't in your favor, Nurse Mitchell." "Numbers don't always determine outcomes, Mr. Stone. Quality often trumps quantity." Something in her tone must have registered with Stone. His head tilted slightly, reassessing. "You speak like someone with experience." "I have enough." Stone was silent for a moment, considering. Then he spread his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Let's be reasonable. I didn't come here to harm you. I came to negotiate. Armed men sneaking through my property at midnight doesn't strike me as negotiation tactics." "Insurance," Stone replied smoothly, in case the conversation became heated. Sarah allowed herself a small, cold smile. "The conversation is already heated, Mr. Stone. Call off your men, now." Stone's demeanor shifted, hardened. "You're either very brave or very foolish. Either way." The sound of breaking glass from the direction of the house interrupted him. Sarah didn't turn to look, a rookie mistake, but kept her eyes fixed on Stone. "Your men just made their first mistake," she said calmly. Through her earpiece, Rachel's voice was taut with controlled aggression. "2 tangos attempting entry through the kitchen window. Want me to engage?" "Negative," Sarah subvocalized. "Maintain overwatch. I'll handle this." Stone was watching her curiously. "Talking to yourself, Nurse Mitchell's stress can do that to people." "Last chance," Sarah said, ignoring his taunt. "Leave now or face the consequences." Stone's laugh held genuine amusement. "Consequences? From one small-town nurse against 5 armed men. I admire your courage, but—" Sarah moved before he could finish the sentence. In one fluid motion, she raised the Mossberg and fired at the Suburban's front tire. The explosion of sound shattered the night as the tire disintegrated in a spray of rubber and metal. Stone dropped to a crouch, reaching for a weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Sarah chambered another round, the sound unmistakable in the sudden silence that followed the shotgun blast. "That was a warning shot," she said, voice dangerously quiet. "The next one won't be." Stone froze, hands still beneath his jacket. His expression had transformed from amusement to cold calculation. "You've just made a serious mistake." "I don't think so." Sarah kept the shotgun trained on him. "Your men are out of position. Your vehicle is disabled, and you're in my sights. I'd say you're the one who's made a mistake." Through her earpiece, Rachel's voice was urgent. "Mitchell, the 2 at the house are moving back toward the tree line." They heard the shot. Sarah didn't acknowledge the information, keeping her focus on Stone. "Tell your men to throw down their weapons and walk out where I can see them." Stone's smile returned, chilling in its confidence. "I don't think I will. You see, Nurse Mitchell, you've revealed your hand too early. One shotgun against multiple opponents. The math doesn't work in your favor. As if to punctuate his point, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of a round being chambered somewhere to her right. One of Stone's men had maneuvered to a flanking position. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Sarah had hoped to end this confrontation quickly to establish such overwhelming dominance that Stone would retreat. Instead, she'd created a Mexican standoff, Stone in front of her, at least one gunman to her right, and two more potentially circling from the house. Mitchell, Rachel's voice was calm but insistent in her ear. I've got the one on your right, on your signal. Sarah made a split-second decision. Stand down, Stone. Take your men and go. We'll pretend this never happened. Stone studied, her eyes narrowed. And tomorrow, will you cooperate with our business arrangement? I'll consider your proposal professionally. For a long moment, Stone seemed to weigh his options. Then he slowly straightened from his crouched hands, moving away from his concealed weapon. A reasonable response, though I must admit I'm curious about a nurse who keeps a shotgun and knows how to use it. Nevada is still wild country, Sarah replied evenly. A woman alone needs protection. Indeed, Stone nodded thoughtfully. Very well, we'll withdraw for now, but I expect your answer tomorrow by Nurse Mitchell, a favorable answer. Sarah kept the shotgun trained on him as he backed toward the Suburban. You'll have my answer. Stone opened the driver's door and paused. Oh, and Nurse Mitchell, that tire will cost you. Consider it a down payment in our future relationship. He slid into the vehicle and started the engine. The Suburban limped away on its ruined tire, the wheel rim throwing sparks in the darkness as it scraped against the dirt road. Sarah remained motionless until the vehicle disappeared from view. Only then did she lower the shotgun. All tangos withdrawing, Rachel confirmed through the earpiece. Head count 5, moving to vehicles. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Copy that. She returned to the house, securing the door behind her. Rachel met her at the bottom of the stairs, rifle in hand. That was reckless, Rachel said, no hint of the warmth that had colored their earlier interactions. This was the voice of a combat veteran addressing a subordinate who had violated protocol. Sarah set the shotgun on the kitchen table. It was calculated. You exposed yourself to multiple hostiles with unknown capabilities. That's not calculation, that's hubris. I needed to assess Stone directly, see how he operates under pressure. Rachel's expression was skeptical. And what did you learn from this little exercise? Sarah moved to the refrigerator and retrieved 2 bottles of water, offering one to Rachel. He's confident but cautious, adapts quickly. He won't underestimate me again. Which means he'll come back with more men and a better plan. Probably. Rachel accepted the water bottle but didn't open it. You realize we're outgunned and outmanned. 2 against at least 5, possibly more. These aren't insurgents with minimal training. Stone is ex-military, possibly force recon. His men are professionals. Sarah smiled thinly. Worried Torres. Concerned, Rachel corrected. We need a better strategy than confronting them head on. Agreed. Sarah moved to the window, peering out at the moonlit landscape. That's why we're going to change the battlefield. Meaning, tomorrow we take the fight to them. At the clinic. Rachel's eyebrows rose. The clinic with civilians potentially in the crossfire. No civilians, Sarah explained. I've arranged for the staff to stay home tomorrow. Plumbing emergency officially. The clinic will be empty except for me. And Stone will believe that. He'll be suspicious, but it works in his favor. An empty clinic means no witnesses. He'll see it as an opportunity. Rachel considered this, her tactical mind working through scenarios. You're setting a trap. I'm creating a controlled environment. On my terms, not his. It's still a massive risk. Sarah turned from the window, her expression resolute. Every day these people operate is a risk to the community. You said yourself they're expanding their network. Oak Ridge is just the latest target. If we don't stop them here, they move on to the next small town, the next rural clinic. Rachel was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do this properly. Full tactical plan, contingencies, extraction routes. Just like old times, Sarah said with a grim smile. Just like old times, Rachel echoed. They spent the next 2 hours developing their strategy, using the kitchen table as a makeshift command center. Rachel had brought satellite images of Oak Ridge highlighting the clinic and surrounding buildings. Sarah contributed detailed floor plans of the medical center, marking entry points, potential cover positions, and lines of sight. By 3 a.m., they had formulated a plan that utilized their limited resources to maximum effect. It wasn't perfect, no plan ever was, but it gave them a fighting chance against superior numbers. Get some rest, Rachel advised as they finished. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of the bone-deep fatigue that had been building since Stone's visit to the clinic. She hadn't felt this particular kind of exhaustion since her last deployment, the unique drain of sustained high alert of life or death calculations. "Wake me at 6, she said, moving toward the bedroom. Rachel was already checking her weapons again. "Will do." Sarah closed the bedroom door behind her, but didn't immediately lie down. Instead, she stood at the window looking out at the land that had been her sanctuary for 7 years. The place where she had buried her past and built a new life, board by board, day by day. On the bedside table sat a photograph of Thomas in his deputy's uniform, smiling that crooked smile that had first drawn her to him. Beside it was a smaller frame containing a faded photograph of 8 women in desert camouflage, the Valkyries in their prime. Sarah picked up Thomas's photo, tracing the outline of his face with her fingertip. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried to leave it all behind. I really did." Sleep, when it finally came, was deep and dreamless, the efficient rest of a soldier who had learned to recharge quickly between missions. Rachel woke her at exactly 6, a mug of strong coffee in hand. Surveillance confirms Stone's vehicle returned to the Oak Ridge Inn around 0200 hours, Rachel reported as Sarah dressed. No movement since then. Sarah nodded, pulling on a light blue blouse and dark slacks, her usual clinic attire rather than scrubs. Professional but unrestricting. They'll be watching the clinic, probably already have someone in position. Most likely. "How do you want to play the approach?" "Normally," Sarah replied, strapping the shoulder holster containing the Beretta beneath a light jacket. "I arrive at 7 a.m. every day. Today will be no different. And after I enter alone, make the preparations we discussed. You take up your position at the rendezvous point. We wait." Rachel nodded, her expression somber. "Be careful, Mitchell. Stone isn't a fool. He'll be expecting something after last night." "Counting on it," Sarah said, checking her appearance in the mirror one last time. The woman who looked back at her seemed both familiar and strange. Sarah Mitchell, the respected nurse of Oak Ridge, overlaid with the ghost of Staff Sergeant Mitchell, combat medic, with a confirmed kill count in double digits. They left the farmhouse separately. Rachel departed first, taking Sarah's truck and driving east toward Millwood, where she would circle back using fire roads to approach the clinic from the rear. Sarah followed 30 minutes later in Rachel's nondescript gray sedan, heading directly for Oak Ridge. The town was just waking up as Sarah arrived. Lights were coming on in the residential areas. A few early risers were visible at the Bluebird Diner. The Oak Ridge Inn, where Stone and his men were staying, showed no external signs of activity, but Sarah knew better than to assume they weren't watching. She parked in her usual spot behind the clinic and used her key to enter through the rear door. The building was silent, the usual morning bustle of arriving staff absent. Sarah moved through the darkened hallways with practiced ease, turning on only essential lights to maintain the illusion of a limited staff presence. In her office, she removed the jacket and checked the Beretta once more before setting it on the desk within easy reach. Then she began implementing the modifications they had planned during the night. First, she repositioned key pieces of furniture in the reception area to create choke points and cover. The heavy oak reception desk was angled slightly, creating a protected space behind it with clear lines of fire toward the entrance. The waiting area chairs were rearranged to channel movement into predictable paths. Next, she methodically went through each examination room, collecting and securing potential weapons. Scalpels, heavy implements, anything that could be used against her in close quarters was locked in the medication safe. Blinds were adjusted to prevent anyone from seeing inside while still allowing her to detect movement outside. The most critical modification was to the emergency exit. Standard procedure required this door to remain unlocked during business hours for safety. Today, Sarah ensured it was secure but modified the lock mechanism to allow for quick egress if needed. She also positioned a small medical supply cabinet in front of it, not enough to block the exit entirely, but sufficient to create noise if someone tried to enter that way. By 7:45 a.m., the clinic was prepared. Sarah sent a text message to the prearranged number, "Patient ready for procedure." Rachel's response came seconds later. Doctor in position, vitals stable. Sarah tucked the phone into her pocket and moved to the reception desk. She turned on the computer, logged into the patient management system, and began reviewing the day's scheduled appointments she knew would go unfulfilled. The pantomime was for any watching eyes, maintaining the fiction of business as usual. At 8:30 a.m., Sarah's earpiece activated. Vehicle approaching from the east, black Suburban with repaired tire, 3 occupants visible. Sarah kept her expression neutral, continuing to type at the computer. Copy that. Second vehicle following, blue F-250 from yesterday, 2 occupants. 5 men total, the same group as before. Sarah felt a flicker of satisfaction. Stone hadn't called in reinforcements yet, suggesting he still underestimated the threat she posed. Vehicles parking in front lot, Rachel continued. All subjects exiting, weapons observed but not displayed openly. Stone is directing 2 men toward the rear of the building. Sarah tensed slightly. Stone was being more cautious today, covering the emergency exit. Acknowledged. Maintain position. The clinic's front door opened, bell chiming pleasantly, as if this were any normal day. Sarah looked up from the computer, her professional smile firmly in place, as Marcus Stone entered, flanked by the bulky man from previous encounters. Stone was dressed more formally today, dark slacks, charcoal blazer over a black shirt. The impression was deliberate, a businessman here to conclude a transaction. "Good morning, Nurse Mitchell," he said, voice pleasant. "I hope we're not too early for our appointment." Sarah maintained her composure. "I don't recall scheduling one Mr. Stone." Stone glanced around the empty reception area, noting the absence of other staff. "I see you've prepared for our meeting. Privacy is appreciated." "The clinic is experiencing plumbing issues today," Sarah replied evenly. "We're only handling emergency cases." "How convenient." Stone moved further into the room, his associate remaining near the door. "I noticed Dr. Brennan isn't in yet. Will he be joining us?" "Dr. Brennan is attending a medical conference in Reno this week." The lie flowed smoothly. "I'm covering essential services." Stone nodded clearly, not believing her but playing along. "Then we can speak frankly without interference." "We can always speak frankly, Mr. Stone. I believe in direct communication." A thin smile crossed Stone's face. "As demonstrated by your shotgun diplomacy last night, very direct indeed." Sarah said nothing, waiting. In tactical situations, patience often revealed more than questioning. Stone moved to one of the waiting room chairs and sat, arranging himself comfortably, as if settling in for a pleasant conversation. "You've presented me with a puzzle, Nurse Mitchell. Most people in your position would have already capitulated or fled. You've done neither." "I'm not most people." "So you've said." Stone studied her with genuine curiosity. "What I can't determine is whether you are courageous or simply foolhardy. Either way, it's becoming an inconvenience." Sarah leaned back slightly in her chair, keeping both Stone and his associate in her field of vision. "If you're finding our interactions inconvenient, there's a simple solution. Leave Oak Ridge. Find another clinic for your operation." Stone chuckled. "Direct indeed, but that's not how this works. We've invested time and resources in this location. The geographic position is ideal for our distribution network. The local law enforcement is minimal. Yet you've encountered resistance." "An unexpected variable," Stone conceded. "But variables can be eliminated or incorporated, which brings me to the purpose of our visit today." Sarah noted the plural "our visit," confirming that the men Rachel had spotted at the rear of the building were indeed part of Stone's team. "I'm listening." "2 options," Stone said, raising one finger. "First, you agree to our original proposal. The clinic becomes a distribution point. You maintain your position as head nurse, continue serving the community, and receive substantial compensation for your cooperation." He raised a second finger. "Alternatively, you resign effectively immediately. Leave Oak Ridge today, never return. We'll ensure a replacement nurse is provided for the clinic's legitimate operations." "And if I choose neither option?" Stone's expression hardened. "There is no third option, Nurse Mitchell. Not one you'd find palatable." Sarah allowed a moment of silence to stretch between them. "I have a counter-proposal." Stone raised an eyebrow, clearly humoring her. I'm listening." "You and your men leave Oak Ridge permanently. Cease targeting rural medical facilities for your operation. Return to whatever rock you crawled out from under." The bulky man by the door shifted his weight, hands clenching into fists. Stone, however, appeared amused rather than offended. "Remarkable," he said softly. "You actually believe you're in a position to make demands." He leaned forward slightly. "What exactly do you think is happening here, Nurse Mitchell? Do you imagine this is a negotiation between equals? That your refusal will somehow deter us?" "I think," Sarah replied calmly, "that you're used to people cowering before you, to threats and intimidation working in your favor. I think you're unprepared for someone who isn't afraid." Stone's amusement faded, replaced by cold calculation. "Let me be perfectly clear. By this time tomorrow, we will be operating from this clinic. The only variable is whether you'll be part of that operation gone from Oak Ridge entirely or becoming an unfortunate local tragedy. Those are your options. Choose wisely." Sarah held his gaze. "I've already chosen." Before Stone could respond, her earpiece crackled with Rachel's urgent voice. "Movement at the rear entrance. They're attempting to breach." The sound of splintering wood confirmed Rachel's warning. Stone's men were forcing the emergency exit. Sarah had anticipated this possibility. The cabinet positioned in front of the door would slow them momentarily, buying precious seconds. Stone's smile turned predatory as he heard the commotion. "It seems our conversation has reached its conclusion." Sarah was already in motion, hand dropping to the Beretta on the desk beside her. Stone's associate by the door reached beneath his jacket, drawing a pistol with practiced speed. Years of training took over. Sarah grabbed the Beretta and dropped to the floor as the first shot shattered the computer monitor, where her head had been moments before. She rolled behind the angled reception desk, coming up in a firing position, just as Stone's bulky associate fired again, wood splintering above her head. "Mitchell status?" Rachel's voice was tense in her ear. "Engaged," Sarah replied tersely, squeezing off 2 rounds at the doorway, forcing Stone's man to take cover. "Rear entry. 2 tangos armed, 30 seconds out." Stone had moved with impressive speed for a man his age, taking position behind a heavy filing cabinet. "You're outmatched, Nurse Mitchell," he called. "Surrender now and you walk away." Sarah didn't waste breath responding. She had positioned herself with this exact scenario in mind. The reception desk provided cover from the front entrance, while the wall at her back protected her from the approaching threat from the rear. It was a defensible position, but not indefinitely. She needed to change the dynamic. The distinctive sound of the emergency exit being forced open echoed down the hallway. Stone's reinforcements had breached the rear entrance. 5 seconds, Rachel warned. "On your mark." Sarah made a split-second calculation. "Execute." A single rifle shot cracked from outside the building. One of Stone's men at the rear entrance cried out in pain. Rachel, positioned with a clear line of sight to the emergency exit, had just reduced the odds. The distraction was all Sarah needed. She emerged from cover just enough to fire twice at Stone's position, forcing him to duck lower. Then she shifted aim to the associate by the front door, who had edged partially into view. Her third shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him back against the wall. "Man down," he shouted, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Stone's response was immediate and cold. "Maintain position." The injured man looked disbelieving but complied, keeping his pistol trained on Sarah's position despite his wound. The second man from the rear entry appeared at the hallway entrance, assault rifle raised. Sarah had a split second to register the weapon AR-15 platform tactical modifications before dropping back behind the desk as rounds tore into the wood. "Second tango at the rear is down," Rachel reported. "Not neutralized, but immobilized. Leg wound." "Copy that," Sarah replied, breathing steadily despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Status of the third from the vehicles. Still outside, taking cover behind the Suburban. Armed pistol. 3 inside, 1 wounded, but still operational. 1 outside. Stone himself position unknown, but presumed armed. The odds were improving, but still not favorable. The assault rifle fire ceased momentarily, either a tactical pause or a magazine change. Sarah used the opportunity to fire twice down the hallway, not aiming to hit, but to maintain pressure on the gunman. "Nurse Mitchell," Stone's voice came from somewhere to her left. He had changed position during the firefight. "This is your final opportunity. Surrender now or my associate will utilize his full capabilities. The collateral damage to your clinic will be extensive." Sarah considered her options. The reception desk wouldn't withstand sustained fire from the AR-15. Moving would expose her to the gunman at the front door. Staying put would eventually result in her position being overrun. Mitchell, Rachel's voice was calm in her ear. I've got a shot on the tango with the rifle. On your signal. Sarah made her decision. Take it. Another crack from Rachel's rifle. The man with the AR-15 staggered into view at the hallway entrance weapon, clattering to the floor as he clutched his chest and collapsed. Tango down, Rachel confirmed. The dynamics shifted instantly. Stone was now effectively alone inside the clinic, his injured associate by the door barely maintaining consciousness due to blood loss, the man outside pinned down by Rachel's overwatch position. It's over, Stone, Sarah called, maintaining her cover position. Your men are down. Surrender now and I'll ensure the wounded receive medical attention. Stone's laugh held no humor. You continue to surprise me, Nurse Mitchell. Or should I call you by your real title? What was it, Lieutenant Captain? Sarah went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do, Stone replied. The moment you drew that Beretta, I knew. The stance, the grip, the target selection, that's not civilian training. That's military. Special operations, if I had to guess. Sarah remained silent, mind racing. Stone had recognized her training. That meant he was more observant and potentially more dangerous than she had initially assessed. Your silence is confirmation enough, Stone continued. So the question becomes, who are you really, Sarah Mitchell? What brings a special operations veteran to a backwater town like Oak Ridge, pretending to be nothing more than a simple nurse? Well, you're delusional, Stone. I'm exactly who I claim to be. No, his voice had taken on a thoughtful quality. No, there's more to this. The woman on the rifle outside, professional work, military precision. You're not alone in this. You have a team. Rachel's voice came through the earpiece, tense with urgency. Mitchell, we have a problem. 2 additional vehicles approaching from the east. Tactical formation, ETA 3 minutes. Sarah's heart sank. Stone had called in reinforcements after all. The situation, briefly tilted in their favor, was about to deteriorate rapidly. Disengage, she instructed Rachel. Fall back to extraction point Alpha. Negative, Rachel replied immediately. Not without you. That's an order, Torres. With respect, ma'am, you can court-martial me later. I'm not leaving you. Despite the gravity of the situation, Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for her former teammates' loyalty. Acknowledged. Maintain overwatch as long as possible. Be prepared for rapid extraction. Stone's voice cut through her thoughts. Talking to your associate outside planning your next move, you should know that reinforcements are en route. The situation is about to become untenable for you. Sarah needed to end this quickly before the additional hostiles arrived. Stone was somewhere to her left in the corridor leading to the examination rooms. His injured associate by the front door was still conscious, but weakening from blood loss. The third man outside was pinned down but would become active again once Rachel had to withdraw due to the approaching vehicles. A distraction was needed, something to draw Stone out or force him to make a mistake. Sarah reached into her pocket and withdrew her phone. With quick, practiced movements, she dialed Jim Calloway's number, putting the call on speaker. Sarah, Jim's voice filled the reception area. Everything all right? Jim, Sarah replied, voice deliberately calm. I'm at the clinic. Multiple armed intruders, shots fired, officers down, requested immediate backup. Stone cursed audibly from his position. Jesus Christ, Jim responded, professionalism taking over despite his shock. Stay put, I'm 3 minutes out, backup's on the way. Sarah ended the call knowing that the reality would be more complex. Jim was likely alone or with a single deputy. The nearest significant police presence was in Carson City, at least 30 minutes away. But Stone didn't know that. Clever, Stone called, voice tight with controlled anger, but ultimately futile. Your sheriff won't arrive in time. Perhaps not, Sarah replied, but he'll arrive, as will state police. Your operation is blown, Stone. The smart play is to cut your losses and run. A moment of silence followed as Stone weighed his options. Then, perhaps you're right, but I don't leave witnesses, and you, Nurse Mitchell, have seen far too much. The change in his tone told Sarah everything she needed to know. Stone had made his decision. He was going to try to eliminate her before escaping. Mitchell, Rachel's voice was urgent in her ear. Vehicles now 1 minute out. Military-grade SUVs. Professional operators. The situation was becoming critical. Sarah needed to act now. Listen carefully, she instructed Rachel. On my signal, create a diversion on the eastern perimeter, then extract immediately to Rally Point Bravo. No arguments. Copy that, Rachel replied reluctantly. Sarah took a deep breath, centering herself. What she was about to attempt was high risk, but the alternatives were worse. With smooth, deliberate movements, she removed her earpiece and placed it on the floor. Then she shrugged off, her light jacket remaining in her blouse and slacks, the Beretta held firmly in her right hand. "Stone," she called, voice steady. "Last chance, surrender now." His laugh was cold and dismissive. "I think not, Nurse Mitchell, but I'll extend the same courtesy to you. Drop your weapon, step into view with your hands raised, and I'll make it quick." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, focusing her mind, as she had been trained to do in the moments before combat. When she opened them again, the nurse from Oak Ridge was gone, replaced by the soldier she had once been. "Now," she said clearly, knowing Rachel would hear and understand. 3 seconds later, a deafening explosion shattered the morning as Rachel's prepared diversion C4 explosive placed near the eastern perimeter detonated. The blast was controlled, designed to create maximum noise and confusion without structural damage. In the moment of disorientation that followed, Sarah moved. She launched herself from behind the reception desk, not toward cover, but directly into the open area of the reception room. As she had calculated, Stone instinctively emerged from his position to engage the unexpected target, pistol raised. Their eyes met across 15 feet of space. Recognition flashed in Stone's gaze, not just of Sarah as an opponent, but something deeper, more personal. For a fraction of a second, his expression changed from tactical calculation to genuine surprise. That fraction of a second was all Sarah needed. Her first shot caught Stone in the right shoulder, disrupting his aim as he fired. His bullet went wide, shattering a framed medical license on the wall. Sarah's second shot hit center mass, driving him back against the wall. Stone slumped to the floor, pistol falling from his grasp, a look of bewilderment replacing the cold calculation that had dominated his features moments before. Blood blossomed across his charcoal blazer, spreading outward from a point directly over his heart. "You," he gasped, eyes locked on Sarah's face. "I know you." Sarah approached cautiously. Beretta trained on him, maintaining tactical discipline despite his apparent incapacitation. "Drop the backup weapon," she ordered, knowing someone of Stone's background would likely carry a secondary firearm. Remarkably, Stone smiled through his pain. "Not what I meant." He coughed, blood speckling his lips. "Afghanistan, 2007, Kunar Province. The female unit. They called you Valkyries." Sarah went cold inside. Stone shouldn't have known that name. The Valkyries' existence had been classified, their missions scrubbed from official records. "You're delirious," she said flatly. "No such unit existed." Stone's smile widened despite the life visibly draining from him. "I was Force Recon, provided extraction for your team after the ambush at Korangal." His breathing became more labored. "You were different then. Hair shorter, face harder, but the eyes, I remember those eyes." Memory crashed over Sarah like an icy wave. The mission had gone catastrophically wrong. An ambush. 3 of the Valkyries wounded. Extraction nearly impossible until a Marine Force recon unit had appeared, creating a corridor for their helicopter to land. "That was you," she whispered, professional detachment momentarily cracking. Stone nodded weakly. "Ironic. Saved you then, only to die by your hand now." Sarah's mind raced. If Stone had been part of that mission, if he knew about the Valkyries, what else did he know? Who else might know of her past? "The men coming," she said urgently. "Who are they?" Stone coughed again, more blood appearing. "Not mine. Competitors. Cartel affiliated. They've been tracking our operation." The implications were staggering. Stone's organization was just one player in a larger conflict. Taking him down wouldn't end the threat to Oak Ridge, it might even escalate it. "Mitchell," Rachel's voice called from outside. "We need to move now." Sarah made a swift decision. She knelt beside Stone, checking his wound with professional efficiency. The bullet had struck his left lung, missing his heart. Fatal without immediate medical intervention, but not instantly so. "Why?" she asked, voice low and intense. "Why target these small clinics? This goes beyond prescription fraud. What's the real operation?" Stone's eyes were beginning to glaze, but he seemed determined to speak. Money laundering, the clinics, perfect cover, rural locations, cash businesses, minimal oversight. He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. The cartels, moving in, taking over the networks we built. You've stepped into something bigger than you realize. Pieces clicked into place in Sarah's mind. The prescription fraud had never been the primary objective. It was just a side benefit of a much larger operation. A sophisticated money laundering network disguised as medical billing with rural clinics as the perfect vehicles due to their isolation and limited regulatory oversight. Rachel appeared at the shattered rear entrance, rifle in hand. Vehicles approaching, 30 seconds max. We need to go. Sarah looked down at Stone. Despite everything, despite the threat he had posed to her and to Oak Ridge, she couldn't ignore her medical training or her military code. She wouldn't leave a wounded enemy to die slowly, even one who had tried to kill her. With swift practice movements, she applied a field dressing to Stone's chest wound, working to stabilize him despite knowing it was likely futile given the severity of the injury. "What are you doing?" Rachel demanded, moving closer, eyes darting between Sarah and the dying man. "He was force recon," Sarah replied simply. "Kunar Province, 2007. Understanding dawned in Rachel's expression. Every special operator knew the unwritten code. You didn't abandon your own, even former enemies, if they had once stood on the same side. "The vehicles are almost here," Rachel said, urgency returning to her voice. "Sierra Team Protocol." Sarah nodded, recognizing the reference to their old extraction procedure. She leaned close to Stone, whose breathing had become shallow and labored. "Listen to me," she said intently. "Law enforcement is coming. Tell them everything about the money laundering, the cartel connection, all of it. Cooperate, and I'll make sure you receive consideration for your service record." Stone's eyes focused on her one last time. "Too late for me, but there's a flash drive hidden inside the Suburban's glove compartment, behind the manual. Everything's there. Names, locations, accounts." His grip on her wrist tightened. "The man to watch for, Eduardo Vega, cartel lieutenant, expanding north. If he takes over, small towns like this, they'll never recover." Sarah nodded grimly. "I understand." Stone's grip relaxed, his eyes beginning to close. "Funny. Never thought I'd end up shot by a Valkyrie in a goddamn clinic." "Rest easy, Marine," Sarah said softly. "I'll take it from here." She rose to her feet, meeting Rachel's impatient gaze. "We need to move. Now." Together they moved swiftly through the shattered emergency exit and into the small, wooded area behind the clinic. Rachel led the way, following a predetermined extraction route that would take them to a secondary vehicle hidden a quarter-mile away. As they ran, Sarah could hear the approaching vehicles, the screech of tires, the slam of car doors, shouted commands in Spanish. The cartel Stone had warned about was arriving, unaware that their competitor was already neutralized. "What about the flash drive?" Rachel asked as they moved through the trees. "We'll circle back," Sarah replied, "after we ensure these new players don't have eyes on the Suburban." They reached Rachel's backup vehicle, an older model Jeep Cherokee with mud-splattered plates, and climbed in. As Rachel started the engine, Sarah looked back toward the clinic, now partially visible through the trees. Men in tactical gear were entering the building, weapons raised. More were surrounding the perimeter, establishing control of the area with military precision. This was no ordinary criminal organization. These were trained operators with clear tactical objectives. "We need to call this in," Sarah said, as Rachel maneuvered the Jeep onto a seldom-used fire road. "Jim needs to know what he's walking into." "Already done," Rachel replied. "Use the emergency channel. Told them armed hostiles at the clinic, possible cartel connection. Advised to approach with extreme caution and request state backup." Sarah nodded, mind already shifting to their next moves. The situation had evolved far beyond a local threat to her clinic. Stone's revelation about the money laundering network and the cartel's northern expansion placed this firmly in federal jurisdiction. "We need to recover that flash drive," she said, "and then we need to contact your former employers at the FBI." Rachel glanced at her sharply. "You're talking about bringing in the Bureau officially. That means explaining our involvement." "I know. Your cover here in Oak Ridge, it'll be blown. Everything you've built over the past 7 years." Sarah looked out the window at the Nevada landscape passing by. The life she had carefully constructed was indeed over. Nurse Sarah Mitchell of Oak Ridge would cease to exist once federal agents began their investigation. Some things are more important than cover identities, she said quietly. If Stone was telling the truth, this cartel is targeting multiple rural communities across several states. That flash drive could be the key to shutting down their entire operation. Rachel was silent for a moment, then nodded. All right, we do this by the book. Recover the intelligence, contact the Bureau, provide full statements. And then, Sarah asked, suddenly uncertain about what came next. For 7 years, Oak Ridge had been her home, her sanctuary. Now that was ending. Rachel's expression softened slightly. And then we figure it out. Together. Like we always did. As the Jeep bounced along the fire road, taking them away from the conflict, but inevitably circling back toward it, Sarah Mitchell, nurse widow, former special operator, faced the reality that her peaceful life in Oak Ridge was over. What would rise from its ashes remained to be seen. The battle at the clinic was just the opening skirmish in what promised to be a much larger war, one that would draw upon every skill she had acquired in her former life, every connection she had maintained, and every ounce of the strength that had made her a Valkyrie. But for the first time in 7 years, Sarah felt the cold clarity of purpose that had defined her military career. Stone and his operation had threatened her community. The cartel moving in would be worse. She had drawn a line in the Nevada sand, and she would defend it no matter the cost to her carefully constructed identity. The nurse from Oak Ridge had risen with a broken chair leg. The Valkyrie would finish what she had started. The Nevada sun hung mercilessly in a cloudless sky as Sarah and Rachel observed the Oak Ridge Medical Center from half a mile away. They had circled back after ensuring they weren't being followed, positioning themselves on a small rise that offered clear sight lines to the clinic and its surroundings. Through a pair of tactical binoculars, Sarah counted 6 men in dark tactical gear securing the perimeter. More were undoubtedly inside. Federal-grade equipment, Rachel noted beside her. Plate carriers, encrypted comms, designated positions. These aren't street-level cartel soldiers. They're trained operators. Sarah nodded grimly. Stone wasn't exaggerating about their capabilities or their intentions. Rachel adjusted the focus on her own binoculars. Look at how they're establishing a perimeter. They're not just securing the scene, they're preparing to hold it. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching Jim Calloway and whatever meager backup he had managed to assemble from the neighboring counties. Against the force occupying the clinic, they would be hopelessly outmatched. We need to warn them, Sarah said, reaching for her phone. Rachel placed a restraining hand on her arm. Not yet. If we call now, Jim and his deputies will drive straight into an ambush. We need to assess the situation, first determine the cartel's intentions. Their intentions are clear enough, Sarah replied. Stone said they're taking over his operation. They're here to eliminate the competition and secure the clinic as their new distribution point. There's more to it, Rachel insisted. Look at their deployment pattern. This isn't just about securing a small-town clinic. They're establishing a forward operating base. Sarah studied the scene again, this time with a tactical eye of her military training rather than the immediate concern of a local. Rachel was right. The positioning of the men, the vehicles strategically placed for quick egress, the establishment of multiple fields of fire, this was a military-style occupation. They're expecting resistance, she realized. Not just from local law enforcement, but from someone else. Rachel nodded. Stone's organization wasn't just one man and a few hired guns. He had backing resources. The cartel is preparing for potential counterattack from Stone's people. A cold realization settled in Sarah's stomach, which means Oak Ridge is about to become a battleground between rival criminal organizations. Unless we stop it, Rachel said, lowering her binoculars. That flash drive Stone mentioned, if it contains what he claimed, it could give federal agencies everything they need to dismantle both operations. Sarah considered their options. The Suburban containing the flash drive was still parked in front of the clinic, now under cartel control. Retrieving it would mean penetrating their security perimeter, locating the drive, and extracting without detection, a near impossible task for just 2 operators, even with their specialized training. We need help, she admitted reluctantly. Rachel's expression hardened. My FBI contacts won't deploy without solid evidence. They've been trying to build a case against these cartels for years. Rumor and hearsay won't cut it. What about the others? Sarah asked quietly. Rachel glanced at her sharply. The Valkyries. They're scattered across the country. Some are still active duty. Others, like us, are ghosts living civilian lives. But you maintain contact. A slight smile touched Rachel's lips. We check in, occasionally, for emergencies. I'd say this qualifies. Sarah gestured toward the occupied clinic. Small town about to become collateral damage in a cartel war. Potential to expose a multi-state money laundering operation. That's exactly the kind of situation we were trained to handle. Rachel was silent for a long moment, weighing the implications. Activating their old network meant potentially exposing other team members who had built new lives after service. It wasn't a decision to make lightly. Even if I reach out, she said finally, they couldn't get here in time to prevent whatever's about to happen. Maybe not, Sarah conceded, but they could help ensure it doesn't spread beyond Oak Ridge. And some of them might have federal contacts. We don't people who would act on their word alone. The distant sirens were growing louder. Jim and his deputies would arrive within minutes, driving into a situation they couldn't possibly understand or manage. Rachel made her decision. I'll make the calls, but first we need to warn Jim without giving away our position or involvement. Sarah thought quickly. Burner phone, anonymous tip, enough details to establish credibility without revealing the source. Rachel nodded and retrieved a basic flip phone from her tactical bag. She dialed the Oak Ridge Sheriff's Department emergency line, which would route to dispatch or directly to Jim's vehicle, depending on the situation. When the call connected, Rachel disguised her voice slightly deeper with a hint of a southwestern accent. Sheriff Calloway, listen carefully. The clinic is occupied by cartel enforcers. Heavily armed military training. At least 6 visible more inside. They have already engaged in firefight with previous occupants. Multiple casualties. Do not approach without significant backup. She paused, listening to Jim's response, then continued. My source, let's just say I'm a concerned third party with expertise in these matters. These aren't local criminals, Sheriff. They're part of the Sinaloa splinter group moving north under Eduardo Vega. Contact Nevada State Police and request federal assistance immediately. This is beyond local jurisdiction. After a moment more, Rachel ended the call. He's skeptical, but taking it seriously. He's holding position a quarter-mile out and calling for state police support. Good, Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. That buys us time. Time for what exactly? Rachel asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. To retrieve that flash drive. Sarah's gaze was fixed on the black Suburban, still visible in the clinic's parking lot. It's our only leverage. Rachel sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. 2 operators against a small army of cartel enforcers for a drive that might not even exist. The odds aren't favorable. When have they ever been? Sarah countered with a grim smile. Besides, we have advantages they don't know about, such as knowledge of the terrain. I've lived in Oak Ridge for 7 years. I know every approach to that clinic, every potential blind spot in their perimeter. Rachel studied the deployment again. They're focused on the main access points, front entrance, emergency exit roof. But they're light on the western perimeter, probably assuming the open ground there provides natural security through visibility. Sarah nodded. There's a drainage culvert that runs beneath that section of the property. Installed 3 years ago after a particularly wet spring flooded the clinic basement. The access point is hidden behind Hank's Hardware, 200 yards west. Size, 36 inches in diameter. Tight but navigable. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You've considered this route before. I've considered every potential approach and escape route since the day I moved to Oak Ridge, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. Old habits. Once we're inside the perimeter, then what the Suburban is still in plain view of multiple hostiles. Sarah thought for a moment. We need a diversion, something significant enough to draw their attention without endangering civilians. Rachel reached into her tactical bag and removed a small package wrapped in oilcloth. I might have just the thing. Brought it as a precaution after our encounter with Stone last night. She unwrapped the package to reveal 3 small cylindrical devices with remote detonators. Low-yield charges, more noise than damage. Plant them on the eastern perimeter, remote detonate from inside the culvert, and we'll have approximately 90 seconds of chaos to work with. Sarah nodded approvingly. Seems you've maintained more than just contact with our old unit. A smile ghosted across Rachel's face. Some equipment is too useful to surrender even in retirement. They spent the next 20 minutes planning their approach, identifying optimal placement for the charges, and establishing fallback positions in case the operation went sideways. As they worked, Rachel used the burner phone to send encoded text messages to three former teammates, short cryptic communications that would activate long-dormant protocols. Responses from Danny and Jazz, she reported after checking the phone. They're initiating contact with their federal connections. Elizabeth is in Europe offline for now. Sarah acknowledged this with a nod, mentally adjusting their support expectations. Even two additional team members leveraging their contacts could significantly improve their odds of containing the situation once the flash drive was secured. It's time, she said, checking her watch. State police reinforcements would arrive within 30 minutes. Their window of opportunity was narrow and closing rapidly. They moved from their observation position, circling wide to approach Oak Ridge from the west. The town was eerily quiet, the usual midday activity absent. Word of trouble at the clinic had spread, sending residents into their homes with doors locked and curtains drawn. The Nevada instinct for self-preservation ran deep. Hank's Hardware sat on the western edge of the small commercial district, a cinder block building with faded red trim and a hand-painted sign that had weathered 30 years of desert sun. Sarah led Rachel behind the building to a small gully where scrub brush partially concealed a concrete culvert entrance. Tight fit, Rachel observed, eyeing the opening dubiously. It gets better after the first 15 feet, Sarah assured her. The main line is nearly 4 feet in diameter. Rachel nodded and began placing the charges in her tactical bag to keep them secure during the crawl. Sarah checked her Beretta once more, ensuring the action was clean and the magazine full. Both women removed their outer jackets, preparing for the confined space ahead. Once we're in position beneath the clinic parking lot, I'll place the charges while you maintain overwatch, Rachel said, outlining the final elements of their plan. Remote detonation on your signal, followed by immediate approach to the Suburban. 90 seconds maximum for retrieval, then immediate withdrawal via the same route. Sarah nodded her agreement. If we get separated, rally point is the abandoned Peterson barn, 2 miles north of my property. Rachel held Sarah's gaze for a moment. Just like Kandahar in '06. Let's hope this goes better than that operation did, Sarah replied dryly. Rachel's smile was tight but genuine. At least this time we're not extracting a double agent with half the Taliban on our heels. Small mercies. With that, they entered the culvert, Sarah leading the way. The concrete tunnel was dry this time of year, though the musty scent of previous water flow lingered. Spiderwebs brushed against their faces as they crawled forward on elbows and knees, moving as silently as possible, despite the occasional echo of movement against the concrete walls. As Sarah had predicted, the tunnel widened after the first 15 feet, allowing them to move in a crouched position rather than crawling. They navigated by the dim light, filtering through storm drains and maintenance access points, their progress slow but steady. After approximately 200 yards, Sarah halted beneath a drain grate that allowed a view of the clinic parking lot. They had reached their destination directly opposite the Suburban across an expanse of open asphalt. From this vantage point, they could see 3 cartel enforcers patrolling the perimeter, their movements precise and coordinated. Rachel tapped Sarah's shoulder and pointed to a maintenance access hatch in the culvert ceiling, 20 feet back from their current position. Sarah nodded understanding. The hatch would allow Rachel to exit the culvert and place the explosive charges while remaining hidden from the cartel lookouts. They backtracked to the access hatch. Rachel removed the charges from her bag and prepared them for placement while Sarah kept watch through the narrow gaps in the hatch cover. When the nearest patrol passed, Sarah gave a 3-tap signal on Rachel's boot. Rachel eased the hatch open just enough to slip through, disappearing into the brush beyond. Sarah maintained her position, counting seconds in her head. 1 minute for charge placement, 30 seconds for return. Any longer would indicate compromise. The seconds ticked by with excruciating slowness. At the 90-second mark, a shadow fell across the open hatch, and Rachel slid back into the culvert, closing the access point silently behind her. Charges set, she whispered. East perimeter, 3 points forming a rough triangle. Remote detonator synced. They returned to their original observation point beneath the drain grate. The cartel patrols continued their circuit, unaware of the explosive devices now positioned at the opposite side of their perimeter. Rachel handed Sarah the remote detonator, a small black device with a single red button protected by a flip cover. On your mark. Sarah took a deep breath, mentally reviewing their plan once more. The detonations would draw the cartel enforcers toward the eastern perimeter. In the confusion, they would emerge from the culvert, approach the Suburban from the blind side, retrieve the flash drive from the glove compartment, and withdraw before the cartel realized the explosions were a diversion. Simple in theory, potentially fatal in execution. 3, Sarah began the countdown. 2, 1. She pressed the button. The first explosion shattered the afternoon quiet, a sharp crack followed by a concussive thump that they felt even within the culvert. The second and third followed in rapid succession, creating the impression of a coordinated attack from the eastern perimeter. The reaction was immediate. Shouts in Spanish echoed across the parking lot as the cartel enforcers responded to the perceived threat. 2 of the 3 visible guards sprinted toward the explosion site, while the third maintained position, but turned his attention eastward, weapon raised. Now, Sarah said, already moving toward the storm drain access point they had identified earlier. They emerged from the culvert like wraiths, staying low and using the parked vehicles for cover as they approached the Suburban. The remaining guard was still focused on the eastern perimeter, his back to their position. Reaching the Suburban, Rachel took up a defensive posture while Sarah tried the passenger door. Locked, she had anticipated this possibility and removed a slim gym tool from her pocket, sliding it into the door seam with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the lock disengaged with a soft click. Sarah eased the door open and reached for the glove compartment. Inside was the standard vehicle documentation, registration, insurance owner's manual. She removed the manual and examined it closely, finding a small slit cut into the back cover. From this hiding place, she extracted a USB drive no larger than her thumbnail. "Got it," she whispered to Rachel, who remained vigilant, tracking the movements of the distracted guard. Sarah pocketed the drive and carefully replaced the manual, closing the glove compartment. They were about to begin their withdrawal when a shout from the clinic entrance froze them in place. "Sector Oeste, comprueba los vehículos." The command was clear, even to those with limited Spanish. Check the western sector in the vehicles. The guard who had remained behind turned, immediately scanning the parking lot with renewed focus. His gaze hadn't yet settled on the Suburban, but it was only a matter of seconds before he would spot them. Rachel made a split-second decision. "Change of plans," she whispered. "I'll create a secondary diversion. You extract with the package. Meet at the rally point." Before Sarah could protest, Rachel was moving, circling wide around the parked vehicles to approach the guard from his blind side. Sarah recognized the tactic from countless previous operations. Rachel would neutralize the immediate threat, creating confusion that would cover Sarah's withdrawal with the crucial intelligence. Sarah hated to separate, but acknowledged the tactical necessity. She began her own movement, staying low and using the vehicles for concealment as she worked her way back toward the storm drain. Behind her, she heard a sudden scuffle followed by a muffled grunt. Rachel had engaged the guard. Sarah resisted the urge to look back, focusing instead on her extraction route. The storm drain was 15 yards away, across a section of open pavement with no available cover. She would have to sprint and trust in speed rather than concealment. Taking a deep breath, Sarah launched herself from behind the last vehicle, running full tilt toward the drain opening. A shout from behind indicated she'd been spotted. The crack of a pistol shot followed the bullet striking pavement several feet to her right. Sarah didn't break stride, reaching the storm drain and dropping into it with practiced efficiency, pulling the grate closed above her. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, now Rachel engaging with her opponents, returned fire from the cartel enforcers, and more distant shots that suggested the perimeter team was returning from investigating the explosions. Sarah forced herself to keep moving, crawling rapidly through the culvert despite every instinct screaming at her to return and assist her teammate. The mission had to come first. The flash drive contained intelligence that could potentially save not just Rachel, but the entire town of Oak Ridge. Strategic withdrawal was the only logical choice. As she reached the wider section of the culvert, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of a vehicle engine roaring to life, followed by squealing tires. Someone was leaving the scene at high speed, whether friend or foe she couldn't determine. The gunfire continued, but seemed to be moving away from the clinic, suggesting a mobile engagement. Sarah increased her pace, ignoring the scrapes and bruises accumulating as she navigated the concrete tunnel with more speed than caution. Emerging finally at the culvert entrance behind Hank's Hardware, Sarah paused only long enough to ensure no immediate threats were visible Before continuing her withdrawal, moving from cover to cover through the western edge of town, the Peterson barn came into view after 20 minutes of careful movement through scrubland and dry creek beds. The abandoned structure had stood empty for nearly a decade after Old Man Peterson died, and his children sold off the surrounding farmland while leaving the dilapidated barn to the elements. Sarah approached cautiously, weapon drawn. The barn's weathered wood and rusted metal roof offered limited protection, but its isolated position provided excellent visibility of potential approach routes. She circled the structure once, confirming no signs of recent activity, before slipping inside through a gap in the wallboards. The interior was dim dust motes dancing in the shafts of sunlight that penetrated through holes in the roof. Old farm equipment sat abandoned beneath layers of dust and cobwebs. Sarah positioned herself near the rear wall where a small opening provided a view of the path from town while concealing her from casual observation. Now came the hardest part of any operation: waiting. Rachel would either make the rendezvous or she wouldn't. There was nothing Sarah could do to influence that outcome without potentially compromising both the mission and her teammates' extraction efforts. She removed the USB drive from her pocket and examined it. The tiny device showed no external markings, no indications of its potentially explosive contents. If Stone had been telling the truth, this unimpressive piece of technology contained evidence of a sprawling criminal enterprise. Names, dates, locations, financial data, linking the prescription fraud to money laundering operations across multiple states. Sarah secured the drive in an inner pocket and settled in to wait, her mind replaying the events of the past 24 hours. How quickly her carefully constructed life had unraveled. Yesterday morning, she had been Sarah Mitchell, respected nurse of Oak Ridge Medical Center. Now she was a fugitive with a price on her head, hunted by cartel enforcers, her cover identity in tatters. The sound of an approaching vehicle jolted Sarah from her thoughts. She moved silently to another vantage point, one that offered a view of the dirt road leading to the barn. A cloud of dust marked the vehicle's progress, a pickup truck moving at high speed toward her position. Sarah raised her Beretta sighting along the barrel as the vehicle drew closer. The dust cleared enough to reveal a dark blue Ford F-250, one of the cartel vehicles from the clinic. Her finger tightened on the trigger, prepared to engage if necessary. The truck skidded to a halt 50 yards from the barn. The driver's door opened, and Rachel emerged, moving with a slight limp but otherwise appearing unharmed. Sarah lowered her weapon, relief washing through her, but maintained her cautious position until Rachel approached the barn and gave their old recognition signal. 3 short whistles followed by 1 long. Sarah responded with the countersign, a single whistle followed by 2 short ones, and moved to the barn entrance to cover Rachel's approach. "Cutting it close, Torres," she said as Rachel slipped inside. Rachel's grin was fierce despite the blood trickling from a cut above her left eyebrow. "Had to borrow transportation. Previous owners were reluctant to part with it." "Status?" Sarah asked, already examining Rachel's injuries with a medical eye. "Superficial wounds only. 2 tangos neutralized during extraction. Remaining hostiles in pursuit, but I implemented countermeasures. They're currently following False Trail heading east toward Millwood." Sarah nodded approval. "The package is secure. How long before they regroup and expand their search perimeter?" 2 hours, maybe 3. Rachel winced as she lowered herself to sit on an overturned feed bucket. "They're calling in reinforcements from Carson City. This is escalating beyond our initial assessment. Then we need to move quickly." Sarah retrieved her phone and checked for signal. 1 bar, barely adequate but functional. Time to call in our own reinforcements. She dialed Jim Calloway's direct number, preparing herself for a conversation that would irrevocably change her relationship with the sheriff, who had been her friend and protector for 7 years. Jim answered on the first ring, his voice tense. "Sarah, where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm secure for now," she replied, deliberately vague about her location. "What's the situation at the clinic?" "God almighty, Sarah, it's a war zone. State police have established a perimeter, but these cartel boys aren't backing down. They've barricaded themselves inside the clinic. SWAT team from Carson City is en route, but it's going to get worse before it gets better." Concern deepened his voice. "Where have you been? When you weren't at the clinic during the initial assault, I thought—" "Jim," Sarah interrupted gently, "I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but I need you to trust me." A pause, then, "I'm listening." Sarah took a deep breath. The men occupying the clinic are part of a cartel expansion moving north from Mexico. They're taking over a money laundering operation that was using rural medical facilities as fronts. Oak Ridge was next on their list. How the hell do you know all this? Jim's voice was a mixture of confusion and dawning suspicion. Because I've obtained evidence documenting the entire operation. Sarah glanced at Rachel, who nodded encouragement. A flash drive containing names, dates, locations, everything federal prosecutors would need to dismantle both organizations. Sarah, Jim said slowly, what aren't you telling me? How did you get this information? Where are you now? The moment of truth had arrived. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, decision made. Jim, I'm not who you think I am. Or rather, I'm not only who you think I am. Meaning, before I came to Oak Ridge, before I married Tommen, I served in a classified military unit, special operations. The details aren't unimportant right now, but my background gave me the training to recognize what was happening when Stone and his men first approached the clinic. Silence stretched across the connection. Finally, Jim spoke, his voice careful and measuring. You're telling me you're some kind of, what, military operative, secret agent? Former, Sarah corrected. Very former. I left that life behind years ago, or thought I had. Another long pause. And Thomas, did he know? Some of it, not all. Sarah's voice softened. I loved him, Jim. That was never a lie. The sheriff sighed heavily. I believe you, Sarah. God help me, it actually explains a few things Thomas mentioned over the years. But where does that leave us now? What do you expect me to do with this information, or with you? The flash drive needs to reach federal authorities, specifically the FBI's Organized Crime Division. They've been building a case against these cartels for years. And you want me to be your courier. I want you to help save Oak Ridge, Sarah countered. This evidence isn't just about taking down criminal organizations. It's about preventing this town and others like it from becoming war zones in a cartel expansion. Jim was silent for several seconds, weighing his options. When he spoke again, his voice had taken on the firm, decisive tone that had made him an effective sheriff for over 2 decades. Where can we meet? Sarah exchanged glances with Rachel, who nodded agreement. Peterson's abandoned barn, north of my property. Come alone. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Jim replied. And Sarah, whatever happens after this, I want you to know that the woman who served this community for 7 years, that's the Sarah Mitchell I know. That's who you are to me. The simple acceptance in his words brought an unexpected tightness to Sarah's throat. Thank you, Jim. After ending the call, Sarah turned to Rachel. We need to prepare for the handoff and our own extraction. Once the flash drive reaches federal authorities, both Stone's people and the cartel will intensify their efforts to eliminate anyone with knowledge of their operations. Rachel nodded grimly. I've received updates from Danny and Jazz. Their federal contacts are mobilizing resources, but bureaucracy moves slowly. We're on our own for at least the next 12 hours. Suggestion, Sarah asked, falling naturally into their old operational pattern, sharing tactical assessments, weighing options collaboratively. We deliver the package to Jim, then separate. You head west into California. I'll move east toward Utah. Multiple targets are harder to track than a single one. Sarah considered this, then shook her head. Splitting up doubles our vulnerability while having our defensive capability. Better to move together toward a secure extraction point. Once federal agencies are fully engaged, we can reassess. Rachel seemed about to argue, then nodded reluctantly. Your town, your call. Where's our fallback? North, Sir Sarah replied. Into the high desert. I maintained a cache near the old McAllister mining claim supplies, weapons, emergency communications equipment, enough to sustain us until federal intervention stabilizes the situation. The sound of an approaching vehicle ended their discussion. Both women moved to defensive positions, weapons ready. Through a crack in the barn wall, Sarah identified Jim's Sheriff's Department SUV approaching along the dirt road, dust billowing behind it. Confirm visual on primary contact, she said quietly. Single occupant. No indicators of surveillance or pursuit. Rachel maintained her position, covering the barn's rear entrance. Proceed with caution. Recent events suggest potential for compromise, even among trusted assets. Sarah acknowledged the warning with a nod, though in her heart she trusted Jim Calloway without reservation. He had been Thomas's closest friend, her protector and ally, in the years since her husband's death. If anyone in Oak Ridge remained above suspicion, it was Jim. The SUV stopped 30 yards from the barn. Jim emerged slowly, hands visible, clearly aware of the protocols for approaching potentially armed individuals. He wore his tan uniform and white Stetson, looking every inch the small-town sheriff despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Sarah," he called, voice carrying clearly across the open ground. "It's just me like you asked." Sarah stepped partially out of the barn's shadowed entrance, keeping her weapon lowered but ready. "Approach slowly, Jim." The sheriff walked forward with measured steps. As he drew closer, Sarah could see the concern etched in his weathered face along with something else, a new wariness that hadn't been there in their previous interactions. The revelation of her true background had changed things between them, perhaps irrevocably. "You're hurt," he said as he reached her eyes, taking in the scrapes and bruises visible on her arms and face. "Nothing serious," Sarah assured him, gesturing him inside the barn. "Come in. There's someone you should meet." Jim followed her into the dim interior, eyes adjusting to the reduced light. When he spotted Rachel covering the rear entrance, a weapon still at the ready, his posture stiffened slightly. "Sheriff Calloway," Sarah said formally. "This is Rachel Torres, former FBI hostage rescue team, and before that, my teammate in the unit I mentioned." Jim nodded cautiously to Rachel. "Ma'am?" Rachel lowered her weapon slightly, but maintained her vigilant stance. "Sheriff, Rachel has been helping me investigate Stone's operation since yesterday," Sarah explained. "We discovered it was significantly larger than initially assessed, with connections to a Mexican cartel, now moving to take control of the established network." Jim removed his hat, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. "I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened at the clinic today. These aren't ordinary criminals. They're operating like a military unit." "Because many of them are former military," Rachel interjected. "Cartels have been recruiting ex-special forces from Mexico, Guatemala, even former U.S. service members dishonorably discharged. They're bringing military tactics to criminal enterprises." Jim's expression grew grimmer. "Then we're even more outmatched than I thought. Carson City SWAT won't be prepared for that level of resistance." "Which is why the flash drive is so critical," Sarah said, retrieving the tiny device from her pocket. "This contains everything federal agencies would need to dismantle both organizations at once: financial records, personnel locations, supply routes. A complete operational blueprint." Jim eyed the drive with newfound respect. "And you want me to deliver this to the FBI?" "You're the only one who can," Sarah confirmed. "Rachel and I are compromised. If we approach any law enforcement agency directly, we risk interception by cartel informants. They have people everywhere, including inside police departments." The sheriff's jaw tightened at the implication, but he didn't dispute it. After 3 decades in law enforcement, he harbored no illusions about the reach of corruption. "Who's my contact?" he asked, practical as always. Rachel stepped forward, lowering her weapon fully for the first time. "Special Agent Melissa Chen, FBI Organized Crime Task Force, Las Vegas Field Office. I've worked with her before. She's clean, and she has the clearance to act on this intelligence immediately." Jim nodded, committing the name to memory. "How do I reach her?" "I have a secure number," Rachel replied. "Once you're safely away from Oak Ridge, you'll call and arrange a meeting point. Under no circumstances should you attempt to reach the Las Vegas field office directly. The cartel has surveillance on all FBI facilities in the region." The sheriff absorbed this information with a slight frown. "And what about you two? What's your plan after I leave with the drive?" Sarah and Rachel exchanged glances. "We're extracting to a secure location," Sarah said carefully. "The less you know about our movements, the safer you'll be if questioned." Jim's frown deepened. "You're not coming back to Oak Ridge, are you?" The simple question carried the weight of everything Sarah would be leaving behind: her home, her identity, the life she had built over 7 years of careful, deliberate normalcy. "Not immediately," she answered softly. "Once federal agencies have contained the situation, perhaps. But my cover is compromised. The cartel knows who I am now, or at least what I'm capable of. They'll be looking for me. And the clinic, the town, we need you, Sarah." The pain in Jim's voice was evident. "You're not just a nurse. You're part of this community." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her throat return. The clinic will recover. Dr. Brennan can hire another nurse. Oak Ridge will endure as it always has. Jim studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly, accepting what couldn't be changed. What should I tell people about why you left? The truth or part of it, Sarah suggested. That I was forced to flee after the clinic attack. That I'm safe but unable to return due to the ongoing investigation. The details will sort themselves out over time. The sheriff replaced his hat, decision made. All right, I'll deliver your package to Agent Chen. What then? Then you return to Oak Ridge and maintain normal operations as best you can, Rachel instructed. Once federal assets deploy, follow their lead. They'll establish a cover story for public consumption while the real operation proceeds behind the scenes. Jim nodded, then hesitated. Sarah, before I go, there's something you should know. His expression grew troubled. There's been talk around town, rumors about Thomas's death. Sarah went very still. What about it? Some of Stone's men were asking questions at the Bluebird Diner yesterday. About you, about Thomas. Specifically about the traffic stop where he was killed. A cold sensation spread through Sarah's chest. What kind of questions? Whether there was anything suspicious about it. Whether the investigation had turned up any unexpected details. Jim's eyes held a question he seemed reluctant to ask directly. It got me thinking about something that never quite added up. The suspect who shot Thomas Martinez was his name. He had no prior violent offenses. Small-time drug dealer, mostly marijuana. No history of carrying firearms. Yet suddenly he's shooting a deputy at point-blank range during a routine traffic stop. Sarah felt as though the barn's temperature had dropped 20 degrees. What are you saying, Jim? The sheriff chose his words carefully. I'm saying that in light of what we now know about Stone's operation and its connection to drug distribution, certain inconsistencies in Thomas's death might warrant re-examination. Rachel had moved closer, her expression intense. You think Thomas's killing wasn't random? That it might have been connected to Stone's organization? I think, Jim replied deliberately, that a deputy who stumbled across evidence of a drug distribution network expanding into his jurisdiction might have represented a threat requiring elimination. Sarah's mind raced, reassessing 7 years of grief and acceptance through this new lens. Had Thomas been targeted specifically? Had his death been not a tragic coincidence but a deliberate assassination to protect Stone's emerging operation? The timing fits, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Stone's group began establishing their network in this region approximately 8 years ago, according to their financial records. Thomas was killed 7 years ago. Jim nodded grimly. And 3 months after his death, we started seeing an uptick in prescription drug cases in the county. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual increase that, in retrospect, aligns with what you've described about their operation. The implications crashed over Sarah like a physical blow. All these years, she had accepted Thomas's death as the random violence that sometimes befell law enforcement officers. She had grieved, she had moved on. She had built a new life in the town where he had died, never once suspecting that she might have been living alongside the very people responsible for his murder. Stone, she said the name like ashes in her mouth. Did he know when he came to the clinic, when he threatened me? Did he know who I was, who Thomas was to me? It's possible, Rachel said quietly. If they've been monitoring Oak Ridge as part of their expansion, they would have done background checks on key community members. Your connection to Thomas would have been obvious. A terrible new possibility formed in Sarah's mind. What if that's why they targeted the clinic specifically? Not just for its strategic location, but because of me, because of my connection to Thomas. Jim and Rachel exchanged troubled glances, neither willing to dismiss the theory outright. If that's true, Jim said slowly, then this isn't just about territory or distribution networks. There's a personal element involved. Rachel's expression hardened, which makes it even more critical that we get this evidence to federal authorities immediately, before anyone else connected to Thomas becomes a target. The urgency of their situation reasserted itself. Sarah forced her tumultuous emotions back under control, compartmentalizing, as she had been trained to do in crisis situations. There would be time later to process the implications of this revelation, to grieve anew for Thomas with this terrible new understanding. For now, the mission had to take priority. Jim, she said, voice steady once more, You need to leave now. Take the flash drive to Agent Chen. Rachel will give you the contact information. The sheriff nodded, accepting the USB drive and carefully securing it in an inner pocket of his uniform shirt. Rachel provided him with a slip of paper containing a phone number and authentication phrase to establish his legitimacy with Agent Chen. One last thing, Sarah said as Jim prepared to depart. When you return to Oak Ridge, check on Dr. Brennan and his family. Ellen and Melissa too. Make sure they're safe. If Stone's organization was willing to target a deputy sheriff 7 years ago, they might not hesitate to leverage other community members against us. Jim's expression was solemn. I'll protect them, Sarah. You have my word. Thank you. She hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced the man who had been her friend and protector since Thomas's death. For everything. The sheriff returned the embrace briefly, then stepped back, professional demeanor reasserting itself. I'll contact you when it's safe to return, however long that takes. Sarah nodded, knowing it might be months or even years before Oak Ridge was truly safe for her again, if ever. Godspeed, Jim. After the sheriff departed, Sarah and Rachel wasted no time implementing their own extraction plan. They moved quickly through their preparations, checking weapons, gathering the limited supplies available in the barn, planning their route to the cache in the high desert. If Thomas's death was connected to Stone's operation, Rachel said as they worked, that changes the calculus of our involvement. It's no longer just about protecting Oak Ridge or exposing a criminal network. It's personal. Sarah continued her preparations, her movements precise and controlled, despite the emotional storm raging within. It doesn't change anything. The mission remains the same. Deliver the intelligence extract to safety, allow federal agencies to dismantle the network. Rachel studied her former teammate with knowing eyes. Sarah, it's me. You don't have to maintain operational facade. For a moment, Sarah's careful composure wavered. She paused, hands stilling on the weapon she had been checking. If it's true, if they killed Thomas to protect their operation, then I've been living a lie within a lie for 7 years. Everything I built here, the piece I thought I'd found, all of it tainted by their presence. You couldn't have known, Rachel said gently. I should have. Sarah's voice hardened. I was trained to recognize threats, to see patterns. Instead, I buried those skills, convinced myself I could be just Sarah Mitchell, small-town nurse. And while I played house, the very people who took Thomas from me were building their empire right under my nose. Rachel approached, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. You made a choice to leave that life behind, to honor Thomas by building something peaceful and meaningful. There's no shame in that. Sarah looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears and cold resolve. No, but there would be shame in walking away now, knowing what I know. Oh, understanding dawned in Rachel's expression. You're not planning to extract with me, are you? Jim will deliver the flash drive. Federal agencies will mobilize. But bureaucracy takes time, as you said yourself. 12 hours, maybe more, before any significant action is taken. Sarah's voice was calm, her decision already made. Meanwhile, the cartel is consolidating its position in Oak Ridge. People I care about are in danger. Sarah, I'm not asking you to stay, Rachel. This isn't your fight. Rachel's expression shifted from concern to determination. The hell it isn't. The Valkyries never abandoned one of their own. You know that. For the first time since the revelation about Thomas's death, Sarah felt a flicker of warmth pierce the cold calculation that had enveloped her. This isn't a sanctioned operation. There's no extraction team, no air support, no reinforcements beyond what we can improvise ourselves. Wouldn't be the first time, Rachel replied with a grim smile. Remember Serbia. Despite everything, Sarah found herself returning the smile. 2 operators against a local militia. Outdated intelligence, minimal equipment. And we still completed the mission. We had youth and stupidity on our side then. Rachel shrugged. Now we have experience and a profound disregard for self-preservation. I'd call it an even trade. The moment of gallows humor faded, replaced by the sober reality of what they were contemplating. 2 former special operators against a cartel enforcement unit with superior numbers and equivalent training. The odds were prohibitive. We can't take them head on, Sarah acknowledged. Even with our training, we'd be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Agreed, but direct confrontation isn't our only option. You know this town, its people, its geography. We have home field advantage. Sarah considered this tactical assessment overriding emotional response. The cartel has fortified the clinic, but their hold on the town itself is tenuous. They're focused on securing their primary objective while awaiting reinforcements. Precisely, which gives us a window to disrupt their operation before those reinforcements arrive. How? Sarah asked. We're limited to the weapons and equipment we have on hand. 2 handguns, your rifle, whatever supplies we can scavenge, against an entrenched enemy with military-grade hardware. Rachel's smile turned predatory. By doing what the Valkyries always did best, adapting, improvising, and making the enemy regret ever hearing our name. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the Nevada landscape, 2 former special operators outlined a plan that defied conventional tactical wisdom, but offered the one thing Oak Ridge desperately needed: time. Time for Jim to deliver the flash drive. Time for federal agencies to mobilize. Time for the small town to survive the storm that had descended upon it. The cartel had chosen Oak Ridge because it appeared vulnerable, a quiet backwater with minimal law enforcement, perfect for establishing a new hub in their expanding network. They hadn't counted on the town having protectors with the training and determination to resist. They certainly hadn't counted on a former Valkyrie with a personal vendetta against those who had taken her husband and threatened her home. As darkness fell, Sarah Mitchell checked her weapon one final time. The Beretta felt right in her hand, an extension of her will. For 7 years, she had been the nurse who had helped birth babies, mended broken bones, and comforted the dying. Tonight, she would be something else entirely, the warrior she had tried to leave behind, but who had never truly left her. Ready? Rachel asked, her own preparations complete. Sarah nodded, her expression resolute. Let's remind them why the Valkyries were feared even by those we protected. Together, they stepped out of the abandoned barn and into the gathering darkness, 2 shadows moving purposefully toward a confrontation 7 years in the making. Behind them, the last light of day faded from the Nevada sky, giving way to a night that promised reckoning. The nurse, who had been knocked to the ground, was rising once more, not with a broken chair leg this time, but with the full measure of her training, her determination, and her righteous anger. Oak Ridge would survive this night, and those who had brought violence to her town, who had taken Thomas from her, would learn a harsh lesson about underestimating what appeared to be a simple small-town nurse. The Valkyrie was returning to the battlefield one last time, and this time she was fighting for more than duty or country. She was fighting for home. As Sarah and Rachel disappeared into the darkness, the wind carried the faint sound of approaching vehicles from the South Cartel, reinforcements arriving, unaware that they were driving into a trap 7 years in the making. The battle for Oak Ridge was about to begin. In the months that followed, Oak Ridge slowly healed. The clinic was rebuilt, wounds bandaged, and lives pieced back together. Federal agents came and went, leaving behind closed case files and classified reports that would never tell the full story of what happened that night. Sarah Mitchell's name faded into local legend, the nurse who disappeared after the violence, whose true identity remained a mystery to most who had known her. Only Jim Calloway carried the burden of the complete truth, a secret he would take to his grave. The town prospered again in time. Children played in parks unthreatened by cartel shadows. Prescriptions were written for those who truly needed them. And somewhere miles beyond the horizon, a woman who had been both healer and warrior watched from afar, protecting still what she had come to love. Some battles leave no monuments, no medals, no recognition beyond the quiet knowledge that what needed to be done was done. Some heroes walk away rather than take a bow. And sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you'd least suspect. The one who knows exactly what they're capable of, yet chooses mercy until mercy is no longer an option. What would you fight for with such fierce devotion? What ghost would you face to protect what matters most?